grandma's passing leads kids to a realization about her young husband. They say the age is just a number, but usually when it comes to romance, big age gaps make people raise their eyebrows, especially when the female half of the equation is the one who robbed the cradle. Okay, so let's face it, the dating world is a tricky one to traverse, especially if you've been out of the game for a while. But finding that special someone is always a huge relief, no matter how different they are. So, for example, there are plenty of relationships with massive age gaps. The Dick Van Dyke, his wife is 46 years younger than him. Funny enough, oftentimes it's the man with the much younger partner. And rarely do you see a youthful male paired with elderly woman, but they are out there. One of the most famous instances came out of Carthage, Texas, and it involved a man named Bernie Tide. Bernie was grown up in Abilene, Texas, and at an early age was confronted with tragedy. When he was only 2 years old, his mother died in a horrific car accident. Then there was his uncle Elmer. His uncle had some serious mental health issues, and as Bernie got older and approached his teens, Elmer started to molest him. Unfortunately, it was all kept hidden, and Elmer was never taken to court or faced any repercussions. Despite the loss of his mother and the challenges with Uncle Elmer, Bernie grew up a peaceful guy with a contagious smile. He stayed in Texas and eventually landed himself a steady gig in Carthage. He worked at the Hawthorne Funeral Home as an undertaker and funeral director, and he made a name for himself in the town. It was during his stint there he met Marjorie Nugent. Marjorie Nugent was married to a wealthy oilman named Rod Nugent. In 1990, Rod died, and Bernie helped coordinate the funeral in Carthage. The 38-year-old Mortican connected with the 80-year-old widow after processing, and the two seemed smitten. As strangers as it sounds, Marjorie and Bernie quickly developed feelings for each other despite the massive age gap between them. Bernie started to spend less time around the funeral home and more time at Marjorie's side. According to Bernie, he felt sorry to the old woman and worried about her being alone. Marjorie even had Bernie leave his job at the funeral home and paid him a salary to help her out with household chores. In fact, she paid for pretty much everything, including weekly date nights at expensive restaurants and private flying lessons. It seemed like there wasn't anything she wouldn't buy for Bernie, but suspicion was on the rise. Marjorie's grandchildren, as you can imagine, were completely wary of Bernie's intentions. The whole series of events was bizarre, and they also know Bernie was well aware of one major appealing detail of Marjorie's life. Marjorie had millions of dollars in her bank account, and her kids were convinced Bernie was in it for the hefty payday once she passed. The suspicion grew tenfold when Marjorie changed her will and left everything to Bernie. There came a point where Marjorie's family didn't speak to her for quite some time. She basically acted like she didn't even have a family anymore. Bernie was her word now, but then things became really weird. They tried to contact her through Bernie, but he told them she was in the hospital suffering from Alzheimer's, and convinced several of Marjorie's grandchildren went to the home, and that's when they discovered the horrifying truth. Alexandria Newton noticed the door to her grandmother's garage freezer was taped closed. She ripped off the top, threw open the lid, and screamed as the frozen body of Marjorie Nugent started back at her. Bernie didn't even try to make a run for it. He was located quickly by Carthage police and arrested. Of his arrest, Bernie said, "I was so relieved. It felt like this big weight had been lifted off my shoulders." While in custody, Bernie gave a full confession to police interrogators. A jury sentenced him to 99 years to live in prison, and Bernie will be 70 years old before he even has a chance at parole in 2029. Well, the case became even more infamous thanks to Richard Linklater's film Bernie, starring Jack Black as Bernie Tiede. The movie caused some controversy among Marjorie's family, but in the end, Bernie was still locked up. Police only can speculate what drove Bernie to take Marjorie's life. Her massive fortune seems like the obvious reason, but no one really knows except Bernie. Luckily, not every case is full of such mystery.